Hello everyone, and welcome to the launch of Viridis Legal, a new climate law firm headed by Jennifer Balding. My name is Simon Moran and I will be your digital MC. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to the elders both past and present. We have a number of speakers to talk about Jen and Viridis tonight, so I won't keep you too long. I would like to acknowledge there are a few people who cannot make it tonight, somewhat ironically because of nature's force. Joining us online, not in person, are Claire Schneider of Climate Integrity, whose flight was cancelled, and my colleague at ASIC, Chris Rowe, whose flight made it most of the way to Sydney last night before turning back to Adelaide. As I said, I won't delay proceedings greatly, but I would like to give my own quick plug for Jen and Viridis. I've had the privilege of knowing Jen for ages. Our first meeting is lost in the midst of time, but was almost certainly as colleagues at ASIC. We were probably discussing trench warfare against a major bank or recalcitrant director. What a great way to bond. Three things have struck me about Jen that are relevant to Viridis' launch. First, Jen's strategic mindset. Jen and I have worked closely on the full gamut of regulatory investigations and litigation. Directors' duties, credit law, misleading advertising, unconscionable conduct. I have constantly been humbled by her ability to combine big and little pictures into a seamless whole and give clear insights about the most knotty problems. Secondly, Jen's passion. While some of us are accustomed to talk big, Jen acts big. At times, I have felt a wee bit shamed by her drive in backing up her passions with action. Over the years, she has consistently been a legal observer at climate protests, given speeches on climate litigation at major events, and championed greenwashing actions at ASIC. Thirdly, and finally, Jen's entrepreneurship. I marvel at her bravery in pursuing what she thinks is right and fair, and her skills to push ahead. Your vision, drive, connectivity, and now execution amaze me. So enough from me. Our first speaker is Sarah Sharp. Sarah is a lawyer and senior manager in the Enforcement and Compliance Division at ASIC. She is a very experienced investigator and litigator.
I am here to speak on my dear friend, Jennifer. Jennifer had a long and distinguished 31-year career in public service at ASIC and APRA, which came to an end just early this year. Over that time, Jennifer held various senior roles and worked on a number of landmark cases, including the collapse of HIH, insurance, the Trio Capital scandal, among others. However, I had the special pleasure of working with Jennifer in her final years at ASIC during what I think was a special and transformative time in Jennifer's career. It was 2022, I just joined ASIC. At the time, sustainable finance was becoming a hot regulatory issue across the world, and particularly in Australia. I joined a working group that Jennifer was leading at ASIC, looking at sustainability, climate, and greenwashing related misconduct, specifically then in relation to listed companies. It's an understatement to say that Jennifer was the driving force behind that working group. She brought remarkable passion, energy, and technical knowledge to the work. Arising from that working group in October 2022, Jennifer led the team which secured ASIC's first regulatory enforcement action for greenwashing against listed company Tulu Energy. Tulu was involved in gas power generation. The action was in relation to representations made by Tulu to the ASX in relation to carbon neutrality, clean energy and emissions. To say that Jennifer was the driving force, as I said, is a complete understatement. She was the heart and soul of pushing that case forward. The Tulu Energy case garnered a lot of attention, including press domestically and overseas. It was one of the first corporate regulatory actions targeting greenwashing in the world. We felt amongst the group and within ASIC that the outcome made a really strong impression on industry. It highlighted the importance of accuracy when listed companies promote sustainability as part of their value proposition. And as I said, Jennifer was a massive part of that. A second outcome soon followed, also led by Jennifer. In January 2023, against listed company Black Mountain Energy. That matter was in relation to representations that Black Mountain Energy was creating a natural gas project that would have net zero carbon emissions. Black Mountain paid infringement notices flowing from ASIC's concern that it either didn't have a reasonable basis for making those representations or that they were factually incorrect. In addition to the energy that she brought to greenwashing investigations and enforcement action, Jennifer also worked tirelessly to bring climate discourse and education to the regulatory space. In 2022, she secured the preeminent scientist, Professor Will Steffen of ANU, to present to ASIC on the basics of climate science. Will Steffen's presentation was striking. I remember remarking to Jennifer that I personally felt like I needed to lie down in a dark room to process Will's distressing explanation of the state of the climate. In 2023, she also arranged for Sebastian Hartford-Davis and Jerome Entwistle of Banco Chambers to present to ASIC on greenwashing and climate litigation. That was, I understand, one of the most attended ASIC seminars ever, attracting over 500 viewers. I think that demonstrates both the relevance of greenwashing and climate change to all of us, but also Jennifer's success in raising the profile of these important issues. I'll wrap up by saying something about Jennifer as a person. She works tirelessly for the things and people that she believes in. She has an inspirational confidence, and as Simon alluded to, is an extremely effective networker. She never shies away from a challenge and has a strong sense of justice. I really miss working with Jennifer. I miss seeing her camped out in the ASIC kitchen, catching up on the climate news on her iPad over lunch every day. Jennifer is now applying herself to a true passion and dedicating her time in a different kind of service. I know she'll make a huge contribution in her space, and knowing Jennifer, I have a fantastic time doing it as well. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Zoe Bush. Zoe is a barrister at Banco Chambers and has particular expertise in climate change and environmental law. Prior to the bar, Zoe was a solicitor at the Environmental Defender's Office. She holds a Master's of Laws from Columbia Law School, where she studied on a John Monash Scholarship and placed first in climate change law. Zoe joins us on Zoom.
I first crossed paths with Jennifer when I was working at the EDO and Jennifer was working at ASIC, heading up the greenwashing enforcement work that Sarah just so competently summarised. And I was immediately impressed by the drive that Jennifer brought to that work, as well as the experience, knowledge, and the strategic thinking that's already been talked about a bit. And as Sarah mentioned, one of the things that Jennifer did was facilitate training for all ASIC and ACCC staff on climate science and the legal issues that may arise in their enforcement remit, including corporate disclosures, greenwashing, and directors' duties. And in doing so, she helped ensure that our regulators had a baseline level of climate and environmental literacy so that they could more readily identify conduct that may fall short of relevant legal norms. And she was also, and in my interactions with her at the EDO, she was really critical to establishing lines of communication with shareholders, consumers, and community groups that were concerned about potential wrongdoing and didn't have the means to do anything about it. And she provided them with an avenue to ensure that improper conduct received appropriate attention by the regulators. And the impact of that work is in that strong track record that Sarah's already summarised and I won't go through again. And I think ASIC and ACCC have been some of the most active regulators in the climate and nature space globally. And I think they can hold their heads really high about that. And at least in relation to ASIC, that's in no small part due to Jennifer's tenacity and commitment. And I think the impact of the action that regulators have taken in Australia is that it's really helped ensure that corporate Australia understands climate and nature risk as no longer as some sort of fringe ESG issue that only the sustainability team needs to deal with, but as a core financial, reputational and legal risk that must be managed accordingly and be on order in agendas. And that's a legacy that Jennifer should be immensely proud of. and one that she'll no doubt continue to build on, as she brings that wealth of experience and knowledge and uses it exclusively to work on these issues going forward. Jennifer brings decades of enforcement experience and a deep knowledge of corporate and financial services law, which will be both a unique and incredibly valuable contribution to the climate and environmental landscape here in Australia. So it's with a great sense of anticipation that I look forward to seeing the impact she'll continue to have.
Our third speaker is Anastasia Radievska. Anastasia is a co-founding member of Legal Observers New South Wales and protest rights campaigner at the Australian Democracy Network. Anastasia works to widen the space for democratic expression through community mobilisation, public advocacy, extensive legal support, and community legal education on rights in protest.
I want to begin today by acknowledging that we're meeting on the unceded lands of the Gadigal people, whose drive for justice continues to inform and lead social change work today. As Simon said, I've been lucky to work with Jen in a number of contexts, both in my role as coordinator, Legal Observers New South Wales, and more recently as protest rights campaigner at the Australian Democracy Network. And I'm really excited to be here at the birth of a new organisation that is concerned with standing up for public participation at a time when the capacity of communities to stand up for their rights and for positive social change is becoming increasingly constrained. I can't help but think this evening of Hannah Thomas, the former Greens candidate who was assaulted by police at a protest last Friday and who may sustain permanent damage to one of her eyes as a result. I was there as an observer, and it really brings home the crucial nature of the work of keeping power to account and bringing a challenge to the restriction of the right to protest through as many means as we can. The assault that occurred on Friday was potentially under the cover of new protest move-on orders introduced by the government in February. So it's truly, it's part of a march of anti-protest legislation, and our attempts at legal observing that Jen has been such a great contributor to are just one small part of trying to show the effect of these powers, of trying to show that the right to protest is only realised in practice and that it has to be defended through the courts and through public advocacy. So I first met Jen when she turned up as a legal observer at one of the many rallies that legal observers attend, and then she became a regular go-to observer for climate rallies, there seemingly every time a climate group decided to do a snap theatrical action in the city or march down to Parliament. When we were preparing to coordinate observers for the Rising Tide protest in Newcastle in 2023, we suddenly lost a coordinator to responding to another brutal policing incident at a Port Botany protest, and Jen then swooped in, offering to be a last-minute volunteer coordinator. She coordinated 40 or so observers at Rising Tide, and it was a mammoth task, as I'm sure you'll attest to, made all the more challenging by the fact that 3 of the waterborne observers were arrested by police, despite being clearly identified as independent observers. Now, Jen being Jen, of course, swooped into action, finding excellent legal representation, accompanying the protesters to court, going up to Newcastle to do that, which we really appreciated, until eventually they were found not guilty, some 6 or 7 months after the action. Not due to the need to protect independent legal observing, but due to the fact that police relied on hearsay evidence of the disruption to the port, but we take what we can get in this space. So since then, I've had the pleasure of observing with Jen and coordinating observers at last year's Rising Tide, and her calm and focused presence, capacity to keep a cool head in really challenging, shifting circumstances, working with people from all walks of life has been really, really appreciated. More recently, I've had the pleasure of working with Jen as part of a coalition pushing for protections against SLAPs, strategic lawsuits against public participation. You may have heard of these as a growing threat to public participation in Australia. They target organisations and individuals who use their voice to speak out in the public interest. Most recently, $600 million was awarded against Greenpeace USA in damages as the result of a SLAP brought against them for their advocacy in relation to the North Dakota Access Pipeline. And we know that fossil fuel companies in Australia are looking at these tactics and learning from them and preparing their own assaults on our right to public participation. So it is a crucial time to be standing up for that right. And I know that from her time at ASIC, Jen knows the corporate playbook inside and out. So it's great to have her in our corner. So good luck, Jen, and I look forward to seeing you in Newcastle and in the streets and in the Zoom meeting rooms.
The next speaker is Claire Schneider. Claire is the Executive Director of Climate Integrity, an independent, non-profit research and advocacy organisation addressing integrity and accountability in corporate net zero commitments. Claire is joining us over Zoom.
So I just want to first offer a really heartfelt congratulations to Jennifer on the launch of Viridis Legal tonight. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm the Executive Director as my introduction mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Climate Integrity, and we're a research and advocacy organisation focused on driving the integrity and accountability in corporate climate commitments. And I only had the pleasure of meeting Jennifer a few short months ago and sort of met and heard about her plan to start a legal consultancy to support sort of civil society to hold corporate Australia accountable for harms to climate and environment. And I think it was sort of immediately obvious to both of us that the really broad overlap of our kind of mission and purpose. And I'm really thrilled to be able to share with you all tonight that first conversation has now led to Jennifer very generously agreeing to join Climate Integrity as the chair of our board, our new board. And we're really grateful to Jennifer for volunteering her time in that role. I'm really looking forward to the work that we will do together over the coming years at Climate Integrity. So Climate Integrity, many of you might not have heard of us, we're a fairly new organisation, and our work is focused on what we think are three of the biggest integrity issues in the corporate climate commitment space. So the first is the role of offsets in net zero, and particularly the role of offsets in creating social licence for fossil fuel expansion. The second is mis and disinformation on the role of gas in the transition. And the third is misalignment of corporate climate commitments and corporate lobbying on climate, particularly through industry associations. So these are kind of our three laser-sharp focus areas that we hope to drive change on with Jennifer in her role as chair of our board. And I think it's worth noting that it's a pretty challenging time for all of us who are focused on sort of improving integrity and accountability in the corporate climate space. Australia's fossil fuel industry, we know, is globally significant in terms of the climate harms that it causes. And I would say that it operates with relative immunity for the harms that it does cause. And when I talk about the fossil fuel industry, I don't just mean the producers, the producer companies that we're all fairly aware of, but I include in that kind of industry the banks that finance the industry, the consulting firms that assure it, the insurance companies that de-risk it, energy companies, plastic producers, airlines that ensure demand for its products, and advertising and lobbying companies that support its social licence. And I think we've heard recently we just have 2 years of the global carbon budget left. So I think there's never been a more urgent time to drive accountability on phasing out fossil fuels. And of course, the law is one of the kind of most important tools that we have to hold these industries to account. But as we've already heard tonight, even that collective right to access justice is under attack from the fossil fuel industry. We've heard tonight about slap suits being on the rise, the right to protest under attack, and a push to kind of brand those people who seek justice as engaging in some kind of lawfare. So I think it's in this context this kind of challenging context that I want to wrap up by saying that I think the climate and environment movements are extremely lucky to have someone setting out to support our collective fights for accountability and for justice, and particularly someone who's so deeply experienced and so courageous at holding powerful companies to account. So I can't wait to see where you take Viridis Legal, Jennifer. Congratulations.
Our fifth speaker is Sophie Ogborn, Jennifer's daughter. Sophie is a criminal defence lawyer at Armstrong Legal. Sophie was also one of the founders of POWAC, which was a not-for-profit that successfully challenged the approval of the extension of the Densrobian Long Wall main long line operated by South 32 under the Sydney water catchment.
I'm so proud to be standing up here and sharing some experiences and thoughts about Mum and the love for what she does. As a lot of you may already know, Mum from being on the front lines of many protests in her bright pink vibrant vest, observing police's actions to ensure that everyone's democratic right to protest is being protected. But you may not know just how pure and deep her love for democracy and the rule of law runs within her. Well, at the wee age of 4 or maybe 5, she was front page, grinning ear to ear in the local paper, holding a hands-off Birkenhead point sign, and from that point on she was unapologetically and completely hooked. The right to protest, the rule of law and important world issues were a constant source of conversation and topic around the dinner table, and her love for democracy runs so deep that she's the only person that I know that tears up at every single protest that she goes to, particularly when the crowd starts chanting, "This is what democracy looks like." It brings her to tears every time. Mum's passion for democracy and the rule of law has led her to inspire both me and my brother Tim with our own versions of activism. Tim was accompanied and taken to his first protest by Mum's Stop Adani protest, holding a hand-painted sign and eventually leading the protest chants and the war cries against the Adani mine. He's continued with that activism and most recently was up with Mum at the 2 most recent rising tide blockades up in Newcastle, similarly leading the chants. Mum has also inspired me in many areas of my life, but most relevantly, she pushed me to join a not-for-profit in my community when I was down in Wollongong doing my degree, being the Protect Our Water Alliance. And then she further pushed me to be more proactive in that space, which then led to the establishment of Protect Our Water Catchment Incorporated, where we joined proceedings in the Land and Environment Court, which resulted in the successful fighting for the refusal of the Independent Planning Committee's decision to refuse South 32's Dendrobian mine extension, and then paying our legal costs as well. But everything clicked for me when Mum started working on the greenwashing matters at ASIC and really put climate and climate change on the map at ASIC. I'm so proud of you and this new chapter that you're starting on, and Tim and I, all of us, will be right beside you and right with you, supporting you in this really exciting new venture that feels like you're just destined for. So
Our penultimate speaker is Timothy Ogborn, Jennifer's son. Timothy is going to unveil the launch of the Viridis Legal website and announce the vision, mission and purpose statements.
Viridis is the Latin word for green. It is often used to describe the colour of plants, foliage, or anything that has a vibrant green hue. Our vision is uniting people, ideas and action for a sustainable future. A landscape where corporate Australia leads with integrity, where sustainable development is embraced as a catalyst for protecting our planet, where environmental stewardship is not an obligation but a shared commitment, and where safeguarding the earth for future generations is central to business success. Our mission. At Viridis Legal, our passion for protecting the environment drives us to deliver exceptional legal services in environmental law and sustainability. We empower corporate Australia to integrate environmental stewardship into business decision-making through education, guidance, and proactive support. Where education is not enough, we leverage the power of the law to hold organisations accountable and to advance meaningful, lasting change for the planet and for future generations. And finally, our purpose. Our purpose is to support civil society, to hold corporate Australia to account for the harm to the climate and to the environment. Thank you.
The final speech of the evening is to be given by Jennifer herself. Jennifer is an accomplished lawyer with over 30 years of experience in private practice and corporate regulation in senior roles at ASIC and APRA. She has also had a long-standing involvement in the pro-democracy and climate environment movements, including through her frontline role as a legal observer at protests and providing legal support to activists.
Wow. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Good? Well, thank you. Thank you firstly, Simon, for that introduction and being a wonderful MC tonight. And thank you to all of you in this room. It's full, I think, who have actually braved the weather, although in the end it wasn't that bad, even though it was supposed to be. But what it is a very salutary reminder that Mother Nature is really the one in charge, and you mess with her at your peril. So wonderful to see not just friends here, but many friends and colleagues online. Janie, how many have we actually got online?
We've got about 30 online, Jen.
Thank you, lovely. So we're actually joined here tonight in this room and online by some of the most professional and passionate supporters of the climate and environment movement across activism, not-for-profits, philanthropy, law and aligned businesses. Next, I want to thank Sarah, Zoe, Anastasia and Claire for sharing their reflections and insights, as well as highlighting the important issues of our time. I'm grateful for their heartfelt wishes for the success of Viridis Legal. I feel privileged to have worked with people of your extraordinary passion, calibre and character, and I look forward to continuing to make a difference in this space. I also want to thank my wonderful children, Sophie and Tim, for helping organise tonight, as well as for putting up with me having pro-democracy or climate podcasts on high volume while I'm cooking dinner, for participating enthusiastically in those in-depth and long discussions about the importance of democracy. And finally, this is probably where I'm going to tear up. Spoiler alert, I want to thank my gorgeous partner Baz. Where are you, sweetheart? His encouragement, support and guidance has just been so critical in my crystallising and acting on this passion to make this next chapter in my career. Thank you, sweetheart. And I am going to just do what I've got to do. Okay. And now for some acknowledgements. I'm very fortunate to be joined tonight by many of my former ASIC and APRA colleagues, and I want to take the time to acknowledge their extraordinary professionalism, passion and dedication. I am talking about you. Yeah, that's you. I've spent over 30 years at ASIC and APRA, holding corporate Australia accountable for misconduct, governance and risk management failures, but most importantly, had the privilege of doing that with wonderful people. I've also had the privilege of leading some of the highest profile and most complex regulatory investigations, litigation and prosecutions. We've worked on some fascinating matters together, like HIH, TRIO, Signo, BBY, and most recently the Everblue Blumenthal matters. We've achieved extraordinary outcomes, but probably most importantly, we've had a great time along the way. But it's been the recent greenwashing matters that have really ignited my passion and opened my eyes to the challenges that we're currently facing with climate change and damage to the environment. My team, many of whom are with us tonight, Sarah, Millie, Nicolette, amongst others, made international headlines in October 2022 with ASIC's first greenwashing matter with the issue of infringement notices against Talau Energy, which was then closely followed by Black Mountain Energy for misleading claims about their net zero and carbon neutral status. As a group of like-minded souls in the room and joining us online, you'd all be aware that our planet is in crisis. It's in breach of 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, including climate change, fresh water, pollution and biodiversity loss. I want to acknowledge the great work that those here tonight are doing to address these challenges, but there's still much more to do. I believe that the two of the most effective drivers for bringing about the necessary change to address these challenges are: first, capital drives our economy. It's as simple as that. So we have to make looking after the climate and the environment good for business, so that it generates returns that then attract capital from investors. On the flip side, the risk of damages claims, regulatory penalties and reputational damage needs to be a real disincentive to pursuing unsustainable or harmful business models. This is why at Viridis Legal we propose to work with corporates to embed environmental stewardship into their decision making and make safeguarding the earth for future generations central to business success. The second driver to effect this change is actually to hold directors and executives personally accountable for harm to the climate and the environment. Boards are on notice that climate change and harm to nature is a significant risk that must be addressed, and if they fail to do so, this will expose them to liability for failing to meet their duties as directors. So where education, guidance and proactive support is not enough, we will look to leverage the power of the law to hold individuals accountable for their conduct. I'm excited to announce the launch of Viridis Legal, Climate and Environment Lawyers, which is my way of bringing together my passion and my experience to address these significant challenges. I'm looking forward to working with this dedicated community to bring Viridis Legal's vision, mission and purpose to life so that we achieve justice for our beautiful planet. Thank you.
So that brings it all to a close, the formal proceedings. So Jan will be around for autographs and so I encourage you all to say hello, enjoy the food and a drink, and thank you all for attending tonight.